I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. My guest this week is Cynthia Kane.
So the first piece is really starting to pay attention to maybe your heart starts beating faster, or you start feeling kind of nauseous in your stomach, or maybe you notice that your jaw is really tight, or just you maybe even just clench your fists without even realizing it. Those moments, that is really a cue to let you know now is a great time to pause, to ground yourself in the moment.
Cynthia Kane helps people enhance their lives and relationships by teaching them how to become less reactive in difficult conversations and speak to themselves, others, and their environment in a kind, honest, and helpful way. She has taught over 70,000 people how to change the way they communicate through her books, including her latest, The Pause Principle, How to Keep Your Cool in Tough Situations, her best-selling DailyOM Course, and the Kane Intentional Communication Training Program. She is a certified meditation and mindfulness instructor, certified breathing coach, and the founder of the Kane Intentional Communication Institute. My interview with Cynthia Kane is coming right up, but first...
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
She's made up her mind to live pretty smart. Learned to budget responsibly right from the start. She spends a little less and puts more into savings. Keeps her blood pressure low and credit score raising. She's cutting debt right out of her life. She tracks her cash flow on a spreadsheet at night.
Boring money moves make kinda lame songs, but they sound pretty sweet to your wallet. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865.
Cynthia Kane, welcome to On Brand.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
I am excited to chat with you. And I was excited because the title of your book, The Pause Principle, centers on the power of the pause. And as someone that teaches leadership communication to professionals out there through my teaching at the University of Iowa, I know that pausing is difficult for us, but important. So talk about zeroing in on pausing.
Yeah. So pausing is really that moment between the stimulus and the response. So it really is when someone says something that may be uncomfortable, or, you're in a situation where you can feel discomfort, right? It's that moment where most people will say, you just take a breath and think about what you need to say before you express yourself. That's really the moment. It really is that space between stimulus and response, and learning how to expand our capacity for discomfort and expand that space, right? And most of us find it very, very challenging to do. It's very easy to say, go ahead, pause, but we're not ever really taught how to take that moment, or let alone know that we have permission to take that moment within a challenging conversation.
And I always point out on the other side of that the other party needs your pause also, because we are overwhelmed. Speaking of stimulus and response, and I'm stuck with you on the Viktor Frankl reference, so I'm here for it. But speaking of the stimulus and response, it's almost stimuli and
Yeah.
response because we are overwhelmed with, even as you and I are talking, and probably despite our best efforts, there's phones that could be buzzing, there's windows popping up.
Yeah.
So there was a quote recently that said that most of us are in a phase a phase of constant partial attention.
Yes, that's very true. I mean, and I think with pausing, what we're doing is we're noticing, starting to become more aware of the distraction and seeing if we can move our attention off of the distraction and back into the present moment to give ourselves that space that we need to then be able to express ourselves. But it's more of a conflict attention, where the idea is that you and I are communicating and we're talking to one another and paying attention to one another, and we're being very active in doing that because there are distractions that are around us. So we really are using that idea of conflict attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you talk about, I mean, the book is called The Pause Principle, but what I really like is inside, after you break down the pause principle, you talk about pause practices.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's easy to sit here and talk about pausing good, but how do you bring this practice to life on the daily?
Yeah. So it really is first and foremost, really prerequisite for any of it is becoming aware of what is happening within you in the moment, right? So really starting to pay attention to sensation in the body and understanding if we are feeling uncomfortable in this moment, or if we are feeling, a pleasant sensation, an uncomfortable sensation, a neutral sensation, because usually we will start to feel discomfort in a challenging situation or a tough moment, right? But we don't really pay attention to it because we're so focused on what we're thinking and what we're needing in that moment in terms of our communication. So the first piece is really starting to pay attention to maybe your heart starts beating faster, or you start feeling kind of nauseous in your stomach, or maybe you notice that your jaw is really tight, or just you maybe even just clench your fists without even realizing it. Those moments, right? That is really a cue to let you know now is a great time to bring in a practice, to pause, to ground yourself in the moment before you continue.
The knowing look that you just saw from me is when you listed off the various things, the jaw clenching.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm also taking notes here.
Yeah.
That's the secret to hosting a long running podcast. Just talk to people that address your own problems that you have, and it's kind of a twofer.
Yeah.
But no, that's certainly, and I don't know when it starts, but I know once it's been clenched for a while. So
yeah. And so it's for you, then it's that moment of realization, oh, my jaw is clenched. That means I need to reach for a practice, a pause practice, to help me, find that place within this moment where I can access myself again to bring clarity and consciousness to what I'm about to explain, express. So there's different practices that you can pull in that moment. It's an acronym. So soften is really, it's an acronym. So you can own your discomfort in that moment. You can, rub your ears, like the earlobe, pull down on the earlobe because your vagus nerve is back around there and it activates. Yeah, it's the longest parasympathetic nerve in the body, which is what we're trying to activate, that rest and digest in the body. So even just like tugging on the ears a little bit, rubbing the little flap on the ear when you start to feel your jaw clenching. You can even rub your jaw too. That can be helpful. That's another owning discomfort piece. Then there's, focusing on the present, just seeing if you can tap back into what are your feet doing? What are your hands doing? What's your belly doing? Just even asking yourself that question, it detaches you from the chaos around you and helps you reset, right? There's many other practices in the book, but they're all very doable and subtle. So people don't actually know that you're doing them,
Look for me, unless you were on a podcast and someone advised you to gently tug your ear. And now if people see me out in the world, they're gonna know what's up.
Yeah.
But
Or if you're just finger tapping all over, they're like, oh, I know. I understand. what he's doing.
that might be a level of anxiety that's not warranted from me right now.
Yeah.
So, we talked a little bit about kind of the baseline stimulus and response being elevated in the distracted digital world that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking about like what we move through. You talked about a little bit earlier about some of the challenging situations that we find ourselves in. So it feels like if pausing is hard enough under quote unquote normal circumstances, when we're in high stakes environment, it seems almost impossible. How can you get back to this when you're in that?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that, when you are not, let's say, in a challenging situation, finding moments, just more little mindful moments throughout the day can be really helpful. So, you pick an object that's in a place that you go into every day and you see the object and you use that as a way to remind you to take a breath or to come into the present moment, right? And doing practices outside of challenging situations helps you in challenging situations. So meditation, for example, is a great practice to do just, pretty regularly, so that then when you are in a difficult conversation, you are more aware of the fact that you need to pause, right? Because you start to pay more attention to what's happening in the body in that moment. And you understand you're getting distracted. You're getting caught up in the language of somebody else or in, the news cycle or whatever it is that's drawing your attention away from what is helpful. It's much easier to recognize if we're doing practices, when we're actually calm, so that we can notice when we are not calm. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the moment practices, though, those really are bringing that awareness to the discomfort. Once you know the discomfort's there, it's like, oh, okay, I need to sub in now a new tool, because I've been using this old one that really hasn't worked, and I've just kind of, pushed myself through this, and the outcomes have not ever really gone well, right?
Yeah.
So now I just need a new tool.
On Brand, we'll be right back after this.
Raise the rudders! Raise the sails! Raise the sails!
Captain, an unidentified ship is approaching. Over.
Roger. Wait, is that an enterprise sales solution?
Reach sales professionals, not professional sailors. With LinkedIn ads, you can target the right people by industry, job title, and more to reach the professionals who are more likely to find your ad relevant. Plus, with 1 billion members on LinkedIn, that means you'll have access to 130 million decision makers and 10 million C-level executives. That's a lot of millions of the right people. Get started today and see how you can reach the right buyers with LinkedIn's enhanced targeting tools. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Go to linkedin.com/MPN to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/MPN. linkedin.com/MPN. Terms and conditions apply.
The Hoover Dam wasn't built in a day, and the GMC Sierra lineup wasn't built overnight. Like every American achievement, building the Sierra 1500 Heavy Duty and EV was the result of dedication. A dedication to mastering the art of engineering. That's what this country has done for 250 years, and what GMC has done for over 100. We are professional grade. Visit GMC.com to learn more. Assembled in Flint and Hamtramck, Michigan, and Fort Wayne, Indiana, of U.S. and globally sourced parts.
Now, back to the show. So you've built an entire method around intentional communication. What are some of the biggest traps that you see people fall into, and selfishly, how can we avoid them?
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest traps is believing the way that, like, believing our thoughts, right? Like the thoughts that we think about ourselves, or the thoughts that we think about a situation or the moment itself. It's really, it's less thoughts and more self-talk. So one of the traps is the way that we talk to ourselves, because we can really make it so that we are having an easier time or we are having a more difficult time. So we can put our attention more on language that is causing more stress and anxiety or worry or doubt or fear, or we can move our attention more to language that is kind, honest, and helpful. And I think one of the biggest traps we fall into is not remembering that we have a choice of where we put our attention and the language that we're using.
So I'm going to stick with language because you write about how and we're just talking about how we speak to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And in my work at the University of Iowa, I lead a program called Story Lab that helps our students develop executive presence skills through crafting and sharing their own stories. And I always say that the stories that we tell ourselves are pretty powerful as well. What role does inner communication play in shaping how we show up outwardly?
Mm-hmm. I think it's foundational to how we show up outwardly. In that, if we're telling ourselves we're not able to handle this project, or we're not able to, speak exactly like, our predecessor, or if we're not able to, if we're telling ourselves we just can't do it, then we show up in a meeting or to a presentation and we can become flustered very easily. We can start to lose our train of thought because we're telling ourselves we aren't able to. And because of that, that is reflected, right, in the way that we show up. And it's the same within, conversations day to day. If we're letting ourselves or telling ourselves that, we'll never be in a place financially, then it will be harder for us to, have that conversation we need to have to move ourselves up in our career and give evidence and support as to why that would be possible. And so we often just continue to feel stuck the more that we talk to ourselves in a way that prevents us from moving forward.
So say someone is stuck like
Mm-hmm.
that, what's the path out of, well, I guess telling yourself, or what's the path to, rather, to telling yourself a different story?
Mm-hmm. So first, it's starting that awareness around, how am I talking to myself now, right? Am I talking to myself in a way that is hurtful? Is it harmful? Is it causing me more stress, right? Once you start to notice how you're talking to yourself, then it's about challenging that. It's about asking, is this true? Am I being honest here, right? Am I exaggerating? Am I being helpful? And am I speaking to myself in a necessary way? Is this really necessary for me to be saying to myself, right? So you really start to challenge this idea or voice that you have, right, that is talking to you in the moment. So you begin there. And just by simply even saying, what do I know to be true right now? Is this even true? Whose voice is this, right? There's lots of different questions we can start asking ourselves. But I think the first piece is really just identifying, how can I talk to myself in a more kind, honest, and helpful way? What would this look like if I dropped the evaluation and the judgment and I came through a different lens?
I almost feel like it kind of leads us back to pausing, because I feel like there's a level at which you need to pause even to listen to your self-talk, because it's easy for that to be kind of the background soundtrack in your head
For sure.
without taking a step back and saying, I'm being horrible to myself right now.
It requires, all of it requires a pause. It requires us to slow down, to start really paying attention to how we are interacting with ourselves, how we are interacting with other people, and really thinking about the possibility of helping ourselves move forward through changing the way that we speak to ourselves and other people, whatever that forward looks like for us, right?
Yeah. Now, you can tell me, ick, don't make that connection. My
Sure.
work is well above that. But as we're here on the On Brand podcast and we're talking about our self-talk, our inner voice, and how we show up in the outside world, a lot of times for founders, leaders, just individuals, that can manifest itself as a personal brand.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I'm giving you a flag that you can throw on ick. But what is the connectivity between your inner voice, outer voice, and what we're conveying out there and sort of known for?
Mm-hmm. So I think that the inner voice is what drives it's what is pushing us forward, right? It is the passion piece, if we're talking about brand, I think, right? So the inner voice is really that piece that is the driver of, this is my intuition, this is what's moving me forward. And then the outer voice becomes how do I want to express that and share that in a really genuine way? How do I want to make sure that I'm, showing the complexity of my inner voice, or how I want to express and make sure that I am connecting in the way that's real for me, right? And then I think by doing so, then what ends up happening, it connects to those people who need that specific voice, right? You're not going to connect with everybody. It's more, there's a specific person out there who would resonate with your inner voice, which you're sharing in a genuine way. If that makes or answers the question.
I mean, it was a broad, wild, and woolly question, so I think you did just great. I don't want to end our conversation without asking about your first book, How to Communicate Like a Buddhist, because the title for me sparks curiosity. I will say I know absolutely nothing about Buddhism. And I will also admit I kind of like the idea of it. So how does that come to or overlay with personal communication?
So with How to Communicate Like a Buddhist, it really is the foundational elements of speaking in a kind, honest, and helpful way. Buddhism, really, it's broken down into the Four Noble Truths, which is suffering exists. And the reason we suffer is because of our attachments to our desires, basically our attachments to wanting more than what we have. And then suffering can end. And then there is a path out of suffering. So on this path out of suffering is one of the elements is right speech. And that is to tell the truth, don't exaggerate, use helpful language, and don't gossip. And if we filter our language through that, or if those become guiding principles for us, then the way that we're interacting with ourselves becomes kind, honest, and helpful and necessary. And the way we're interacting with others becomes that way as well. So we start to build a lot of self-compassion, compassion for others, and we become more responsive instead of reactive, and be able to speak clearly, concisely, consciously. So it really is a foundational piece for me in the work that I do. because it really comes down to guiding principles of communicating in a kind, honest, and helpful way.
Gosh, the overlap is just as cool as I thought it would be. So that is insightful to hear. So I know from looking at the podcast analytics, this show comes out on a Monday, and most listeners are getting to it there at the beginning of the week and listening then. And that's also the point at which the week is kind of ratcheting up to, we've come off the weekend, and we pretty quickly find ourselves back in it, hence all the jokes about Mondays. So as folks are listening to this, what's something small, a daily practice that listeners could start doing today to become more intentional communicators?
So waking up in the morning, taking 5 long, slow, deep breaths, even while you're in bed, before you even get out of bed. So it really is an inhale and exhale 1, and doing that 5 times. That can be enough. The other piece you can do is, if you miss that, just see if in the morning you can set your intention for the day. Really thinking of, how do I want to show up in my conversations today? Picking maybe one interaction that you know you're going to be having with one specific person, and deciding, okay, today I'm going to be more patient in this interaction. Just setting an intention, becoming more conscious, can be really helpful.
Awesome. Great tips for folks to think about. Cynthia, I've been smiling throughout our conversation. It is now my delight to get to ask you for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Okay. So the brand that's made me smile recently is Pratima Skincare.
Okay, tell me more.
Tell you more. So Pratima Skincare, it's a Ayurveda skincare, and the colors are really calming, and there's a mix of different symbols, and it has this overall quality of just inviting you in. And that, to me, when I go there, I just smile.
I love that. Where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
You can go to my website. It's cynthiakane.com. You can follow me on YouTube. I'm there as well. And you can follow me on Instagram at cykane1. I'm all those places.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Cynthia Kane, thanks for being on brand with us.
Thank you. I had fun.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.